The transport ship Morning Star drifted quietly through space, its hull gleaming silver against the black void. Inside, 32 human children pressed their faces against the windows, watching distant stars twinkle like tiny diamonds. They were on their way to the biggest adventure of their young lives, a cultural exchange program with alien species on the neutral station Harmony Point. 8-year-old Kang Ji-woo bounced in her seat, her pigtails dancing as she pointed at a purple nebula. "Look, Minho, it looks like cotton candy," she called to the older boy sitting across the aisle. Park Minho, 14 and trying to act mature, smiled despite himself. "That's a stellar nursery, Ji-woo. New stars are being born there." He had read about it in the preparation materials Dr. Yoon had given them. Dr. Yoon Hana moved through the cabin, checking on each child. As their guardian and teacher, she felt responsible for all of them. The children came from different colonies, but they had bonded quickly during the 3-day journey. Some played quiet games, others drew pictures of the aliens they hoped to meet, and a few napped peacefully. "Dr. Yoon," called out 12-year-old Song Yoonji, "will the aliens really have blue skin like in the pictures?" "Some of them do," Dr. Yoon replied gently. "Remember, we talked about being respectful. They might look different, but they have feelings just like us." The ship's communication system crackled to life. "Attention passengers, this is Captain Lim. We're approaching the hegemony checkpoint. This is routine. They just need to scan our cargo and check our papers. Should only take a few minutes." Dr. Yoon felt a small worry in her stomach, but she smiled at the children. "Everything's fine. Just standard procedure." 3 massive alien ships surrounded the Morning Star. They were dark gray and shaped like sharp triangles, nothing like the friendly rounded ships in the children's picture books. Bright beams of light swept over the human vessel. Commander Veltar stood on the bridge of the lead hegemony ship, his tall, thin frame casting a shadow over the control panels. His species, the Zarathi, had no concept of childhood as humans understood it. Their young were raised in communal facilities and considered small adults from the age of 5. "Scan complete, Commander," reported his subordinate. "The human vessel shows standard educational supplies, but they took longer than normal to respond to our hail." Veltar's large dark eyes showed no emotion. "Suspicious. We will detain them for proper inspection. Transfer all passengers to holding cells for questioning." "Sir, our records show many of the passengers are classified as human children. They're pre-adult stage. Should we modify detention procedures?" "Negative. Use standard protocols. A human is a human, regardless of size." Dr. Yoon watched in growing alarm as alien soldiers in environmental suits boarded their ship. The children crowded around her, sensing something was wrong. "It's okay," she whispered, though her voice shook slightly. "Just stay calm and do what they say." The lead soldier spoke through a translator device that made his voice sound flat and mechanical. "All passengers will be transferred for routine inspection. Gather personal items quickly." Little Ji-woo grabbed Dr. Yoon's hand. "I'm scared." "Why do they sound so mean?" "They're not trying to be mean, sweetheart. They just talk differently than us." The soldiers separated the children from Dr. Yoon and the 2 other adult guardians. "Adults go to Section 7. Small humans go to Section 12. Wait!" Dr. Yoon stepped forward. "You can't separate the children from their guardians. They need adult supervision." The soldier tilted his head, confused. "Small humans require supervision. Why?" "They can walk and communicate. Because they're children. They get scared, they might get sick, they need comfort and care." The translator device made a strange noise as it processed words that had no equivalent in the soldier's language. "Your emotional display is noted but irrelevant. Standard procedure will be followed." The children were herded into a different transport than the adults. Minho tried to stay brave for the younger ones, but his voice cracked as he called out, "Dr. Yoon, don't leave us. I won't let them keep us apart." She shouted back. But the doors had already sealed shut. The holding cells on the hegemony station were built for adult criminals. Gray metal walls stretched up 10 feet high with a single hard bench and a small toilet. The lighting was harsh and white, designed to prevent any sense of comfort or rest. The children huddled together in groups, sharing the few toys and comfort items they had managed to grab. Ji-woo clutched a small stuffed rabbit, tears streaming down her face. "I want to go home. I want my daddy." Minho sat beside her, trying to remember what his own father had taught him about being strong. "Hey, it's okay. Dr. Yoon will fix this. She's probably talking to them right now." But Dr. Yoon was having no luck at all. The The station's processing computer kept classifying her requests as emotional outbursts and filing them under ignore unless violent. She had tried, explaining 12 different ways that human children were not the same as adults, that they needed special care, that separating them caused psychological trauma. Your species shows inefficient attachment behaviors, the duty officer finally told her. Small humans should be capable of independent function. Your concern is noted but deemed excessive. Hours passed. The children grew more distressed as the strange environment and separation from familiar adults took its toll. Some of the younger ones stopped eating the alien food that was provided. Others withdrew into themselves, barely speaking. Jiwoo developed a fever. Her small body shook as she curled up on the cold metal bench, her stuffed rabbit pressed against her chest. The other children gathered around her, but they didn't know how to help. Something's wrong with her, Minho told the guard through the cell's communication panel. She's really sick. Please, she needs a doctor. The guard looked at the small human through the barrier. In his species, illness was simply endured until it passed or the individual died. Medical intervention was reserved for serious injuries. Subject appears functional. No intervention required. Meanwhile, news of the detention was spreading through human space. A simple communication from Ambassador Lee Tae-hyun to the Colonial Authority had become an emergency bulletin. 32 human children detained by hegemony forces. Separated from guardians. Cause unknown. The message reached New Busan Colony just as Kang Do-hyun was closing his small electronics shop for the day. When he heard his daughter's name on the emergency broadcast, his world stopped. His little Jiwoo, who still needed him to check for monsters under her bed, who cried when she scraped her knee, who had been so excited about meeting aliens. She was alone and scared in an alien prison. Do-hyun's hands shook as he activated his personal communicator. This is Kang Do-hyun. My daughter Jiwoo is on that ship. What are you doing to get them back? Similar calls were flooding communication networks across 3 star systems. Parents, grandparents, teachers, and friends, anyone who loved those children, demanded answers. Back on the station, Dr. Yoon finally managed to reach Ambassador Lee Tae-hyun through the diplomatic channels. Her voice was rough from hours of pleading with alien bureaucrats. Ambassador, they don't understand. They think the children are just small adults. Jiwoo is getting sicker and the others are traumatized. We need to get them out of there now. Lee's voice was tight with controlled anger. I'm already en route with a diplomatic team. Hold on, Doctor. We're coming. But Commander Veltar was beginning to understand that this routine detention was becoming something much larger than he had expected. His communication array was receiving increasingly urgent messages from human space. Ships were changing course toward his location. What had started as a simple customs check was spiraling into something he didn't recognize. He looked at the reports from the detention areas. The small humans were exhibiting what his medical staff called deterioration of function. They were becoming listless. Some were refusing to eat, and several showed signs of illness that had no apparent physical cause. For the first time in his career, Commander Veltar wondered if he had made a mistake. The news hit human space like a thunderbolt. Within 6 hours of the first emergency broadcast, every human colony, station, and ship knew that 32 children were being held prisoner by aliens. The details spread through communication networks, social feeds, and word of mouth with incredible speed. On the military base at Terra Nova, Admiral Kim Sora was reviewing supply reports when her aide burst through the door without knocking. Lieutenant Park's face was pale and his hands shook as he handed her a datapad. Admiral, you need to see this immediately. Kim Sora read the report twice, her jaw tightening with each word. 32 children, separated from their guardians, held in adult detention facilities, one child already showing signs of serious illness. Get me Fleet Command, she said, her voice deadly quiet. Now. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out in thousands of homes, offices, and ships. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Parents who had never touched a weapon started asking about military service. Peaceful merchants began inquiring about combat training. Grandparents pulled old uniforms out of storage. Captain Cho Woo-bin was eating dinner with his wife and 3 young children when the emergency broadcast interrupted their evening news. His 5-year-old daughter, Minji, looked up from her coloring book as the serious voice described the detained children. Daddy, why are the alien police being mean to the kids? Cho looked at his daughter's innocent face, then at his other children. 7-year-old twins who were the same age as some of the detained kids. His wife saw the change in his expression and quietly reached for his hand. "I have to go," he said simply. "I know," she replied, squeezing his fingers. "Bring them home." Dr. Shin Hyejin was one of the galaxy's leading experts on child psychology. When the news reached her research station, she immediately began broadcasting emergency warnings to any official who would listen. "You don't understand," she pleaded with a hegemony diplomat over the communication link. "Human children are not small adults. Their brains are still developing. Separation from caregivers and exposure to high-stress environments can cause permanent psychological damage. Some might not recover." The alien diplomat's translated response was maddeningly calm. "Your emotional reaction is noted. However, the subjects are receiving adequate nutrition and shelter. No medical intervention is indicated." "They could die," Dr. Shin shouted. "Not from injury or disease, but from fear and loneliness. Human children have literally died from being separated from their parents." The communication link went dead. The diplomat had disconnected, filing her call under irrelevant emotional disturbance. Meanwhile, on Nexus Prime Station, the situation was getting worse. Little Jiwoo's fever had spiked higher, and she barely responded when the other children tried to talk to her. Her small body curled into a tight ball on the metal bench, shivering despite the warm temperature. Minho knelt beside her, feeling helpless. At 14, he was the oldest, and the other children looked to him for guidance, but he didn't know what to do. "Jiwoo, please eat something." "Just a little bit?" The 8-year-old shook her head weakly. The alien food tasted wrong and smelled strange. Everything was wrong. The lights were too bright. The walls were too high. The adults were gone, and scary aliens in metal suits walked past their cell without even looking at them. "I want my daddy," she whispered for the 100th time. Other children were showing problems too. 10-year-old Choi Sunho had stopped talking entirely, just sitting in the corner and staring at the wall. 12-year-old Imnari had developed a nervous cough that wouldn't stop. The younger children cried constantly, calling for parents who couldn't hear them. The alien guards found the noise irritating but not alarming. In their species, young ones who couldn't adapt to new situations simply didn't survive. It was natural selection at work. Dr. Yoon Hana had been trying for hours to convince anyone in authority to let her see the children. She had explained human child development, attachment theory, and the critical importance of familiar caregivers during stress. The aliens listened politely and filed her requests under pending review. "Please," she begged the processing officer for the 20th time, "at least let me check on them. I'm a doctor. I can help with the sick child. Medical staff has evaluated the subjects. No intervention required. Your medical staff doesn't understand human physiology. That little girl could be dying and you wouldn't even know it." The officer's large eyes blinked slowly. "Dying from what injury?" "Medical scanners show no trauma," Dr. Yoon wanted to scream. How could she explain that a broken heart could kill just as surely as a broken bone? That human children needed love and comfort like they needed air and water? Back in human space, the response was building to unprecedented levels. Admiral Kim Sora stood before a holographic display, showing ship movements across 3 sectors. Red dots were converging on Nexus Prime from every direction. "Status report," she ordered. 47 ships already en route to the station, her operations chief reported. "More are launching every hour. We're seeing everything from military cruisers to converted cargo haulers. Even civilian ships are requesting armament permits." "How many personnel?" "Current count is over 15,000 volunteers. That number is climbing fast. We're having to turn people away." Kim Sora studied the display. In her 30 years of military service, she had never seen anything like this. Humans were abandoning jobs, selling possessions, and traveling across the galaxy for children they had never met. Because they were children. Because they were human. Because somewhere in the cold depths of space, 32 kids were scared and alone. "Ma'am," her aide interrupted. "We're receiving a transmission from Kang Do-yoon. He's demanding to speak with you directly." Kim nodded. She had been expecting this call. Kang Do-yoon's face appeared on the screen. He was a simple man, a small-time electronics merchant from New Busan Colony. But his eyes burned with a fury that made the Admiral take notice. "My daughter is 8 years old," he said without preamble. "She's afraid of the dark. She still sleeps with a stuffed rabbit. She cries when she gets a splinter. And you people let aliens lock her in a prison cell. Mr. Kang, I understand your anger, We're mobilizing everything we have to— No, you don't understand. Do-hyun's voice cracked with emotion. I sold my shop. I mortgaged my home. I bought passage on the first ship heading toward that station. I'm coming for my daughter, and I don't care what army stands in my way. Similar conversations were happening across human space. Parents were liquidating life savings to join the growing fleet. Military bases were overwhelmed with volunteers. Even elderly humans who hadn't left their home planets in decades were demanding transport to help with the rescue. Commander Veltar was beginning to realize he had seriously underestimated the situation. His communication array was receiving constant traffic from human ships demanding the release of the children. His superiors in the hegemony were asking increasingly sharp questions about why a routine detention was causing such a massive response. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're now tracking over 100 human vessels heading our direction. Some are military ships, but many appear to be civilian craft that have been hastily armed. Veltar studied the tactical display with growing unease. The approaching human fleet was unlike anything in his military experience. It wasn't organized like a proper invasion force. Instead, it looked like a swarm of angry insects, each ship flying independently but all heading for the same target. Request reinforcements from Fleet Command, he ordered. Sir, what should I tell them is the threat level? Veltar looked at the display again. By all military logic, this should be a simple situation to handle. The humans had no legal standing to demand the release of the detainees. His station had superior firepower to any reasonable rescue force, but something about the approaching fleet made his skin crawl. There was something primitive and terrifying about the way the ships moved. Not like a military formation, but like a pack of predators hunting together. Tell them, he said slowly, that we may have a situation we don't fully understand. In the detention cells, Minho was trying to keep the other children calm while Jiwoo's condition worsened. The little girl was barely conscious now, her breathing shallow and rapid. Listen, he told the others, his young voice trying to sound confident. My dad always said that humans take care of their own. Somewhere out there, our families are coming for us. We just have to hold on a little longer. 11-year-old Bae Gina looked up at him with tear-filled eyes. But what if they can't find us? What if the aliens won't let them come? Minho thought about his father's stories of Earth's history, how humans had fought impossible odds to protect their families, how they had crossed oceans and conquered continents driven by love for their children. They'll come, he said with absolute certainty. Even if they have to fight every alien in the galaxy, they'll come for us. Outside in the cold depths of space, that was exactly what was happening. 100 ships had become 200, then 300. The largest rescue fleet in human history was bearing down on Nexus Prime Station, and at its heart was a simple truth that the aliens had failed to understand. Humans would do anything for their children. Absolutely anything. Space around Nexus Prime Station was becoming crowded. What had started as a few dozen ships had grown into the largest human fleet ever assembled. Military cruisers flew alongside converted cargo haulers. Family transport ships shared space with mining vessels that had been hastily fitted with weapons. Fleet Admiral Jang Min-seok stood on the bridge of the flagship Determination, watching the tactical display with amazement. In 40 years of military service, he had never seen anything like this. Ships were still arriving every hour, their captains demanding to join the rescue operation. Admiral, his communications officer called out, we're receiving another volunteer ship. It's a pleasure yacht called Family Dreams. The captain says he has no weapons, but he's not leaving without those kids. Jang nodded grimly. The yacht belonged to a wealthy businessman whose own children were safe at home, but who felt compelled to help anyway. It was the same story repeated hundreds of times. Humans dropping everything to rush toward children they had never met. Add them to the humanitarian support group, he ordered. They can help with medical evacuation when we get the children out. When, not if. There was no question in any human mind that they would succeed. The only question was how much of the station would be left standing afterward. In his personal quarters, Kang Do-hyun stared out at the approaching station through a small porthole. He had sold everything he owned to buy passage on a refugee transport that was now part of the massive fleet. His hands shook as he thought about his little Jiwoo, alone and scared in an alien prison. He pulled out a small photo of his daughter, her first day at school, smiling gap-toothed at the camera with her backpack nearly as big as she was. The other passengers in his section were all parents too, all driven by the same desperate need to reach their children. "We're going to get them back," said the woman sitting next to him. Her son was 13-year-old Lee Junho, one of the older children in the group. "Whatever it takes." Do-hyun nodded, tucking the photo safely back into his pocket. "Whatever it takes," he agreed. On Nexus Prime Station, Commander Veltar was facing the crisis of his career. His superiors had sent additional ships, but even with reinforcements, he was drastically outnumbered. The human fleet now included over 800 vessels of various sizes. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the humans are maintaining position at the edge of our defensive perimeter. They're not making any aggressive moves, but they're not leaving either." Veltar studied the formation. The human ships spread out in a loose pattern that made no sense from a military perspective. There was no clear command structure, no organized battle lines. Yet something about their positioning made him nervous. "Any response to our demands that they withdraw?" The human admiral sent a single message, "Sir." He said they're not leaving without their children. Representative Bae Suji had been working frantically to prevent the situation from escalating into open warfare. As a member of the Galactic Council's mediation team, she understood both human and alien perspectives, but she was finding it nearly impossible to make the hegemony officials understand what they were dealing with. "You have to release the children," she pleaded with the station commander through a diplomatic channel. "This isn't just about legal procedures anymore. You're facing the wrath of an entire species." Commander Veltar's image flickered on the communication screen. "Representative Bae, we cannot simply release detainees because their species becomes emotional. It would set a dangerous precedent. Commander, with respect, you don't understand what you've done. In human culture, children are sacred. They're not just small adults. They're the future of the species. Every human out there would die before letting harm come to those kids. That is an inefficient biological response. Surely they understand that losing adult lives to save juveniles is counterproductive." Bae closed her eyes in frustration. How could she explain that humans didn't think in terms of efficiency when their children were threatened? That the very irrationality of their response was what made them so dangerous? "Commander, let me put this in terms you might understand. You've just threatened the offspring of one of the galaxy's most successful predator species. What you're seeing isn't an emotional outburst. It's a hunting pack preparing to attack." In the detention cells, the children's condition was getting worse by the hour. Jiwoo was barely conscious, her small body burning with fever. The other children had gathered around her, trying to share their warmth and comfort. Minho was doing his best to take care of everyone, but at 14, he was just a child himself. His voice was hoarse from trying to keep spirits up, and dark circles ringed his eyes from lack of sleep. "She needs real medicine," he told the guard through the communication panel. "Please, she's just a little kid. Can't you help her?" The alien guard looked at the small human with something approaching confusion. In his species, the weak were left to die naturally. Medical resources were reserved for those who could contribute to society. But something about the older human's distress was puzzling. "Why do you concern yourself with a failing individual?" the guard asked. "Focus on your own survival." Minho stared at him in disbelief. "Because she's my friend. Because she's scared and hurt and she needs help. How can you just watch her suffer?" The guard tilted his head, processing this information. The concept of caring for non-related individuals was foreign to his understanding, yet the young human seemed genuinely distressed by another's pain. Dr. Yoon Hana had finally been granted a hearing with the station's medical director. She sat across from the alien physician, a tall, thin being with forearms and skin that looked like polished metal. "Dr. Yoon," the alien said through a translation device, "our scans show the young humans are physically undamaged. Why do you claim they require medical intervention?" "Because they're suffering from psychological trauma," she explained for what felt like the 1,000th time. Human children form strong emotional bonds with their caregivers. When those bonds are broken suddenly, it can cause severe stress reactions. Some of these children might develop permanent mental health problems. Mental health is not our concern. We treat physical injuries only. But for humans, mental health and physical health are connected. Stress can cause real illness. That little girl's fever isn't from an infection. It's from fear and separation anxiety. The medical director's large eyes blinked slowly. "You claim emotional states can cause physical symptoms?" "Yes, haven't you studied human biology at all?" "We studied human anatomy and basic physiology. Emotional responses were deemed irrelevant to medical treatment. Dr. Yoon felt a chill of horror. These aliens were trying to treat human children without understanding the most basic facts about human psychology. They might as well be operating blind. Meanwhile, the human fleet was making final preparations. Admiral Jang had called a meeting of all ship captains, appearing on screens throughout the massive formation. "People," he began, his weathered face serious. "I want to be clear about what we're facing. This station has significant defensive capabilities. Some of us might not make it home." Captain Cho Woobin listened from the bridge of his assault ship Shield Bearer. Around him, his crew, all volunteers, all parents, checked their equipment one final time. "But," the Admiral continued, "those are our children in there, human children, and we don't leave our kids behind. Ever." A cheer went up from 800 ships. It wasn't the disciplined response of a military unit. It was the roar of parents ready to fight for their young. "All ships, prepare for boarding operations. Medical teams, stand by for emergency evacuation. Remember, the children are our priority. Everything else is secondary." Commander Veltar watched the human fleet begin to move and felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Not fear of death, which he understood, but fear of something primal and unstoppable. The human ships weren't advancing like a military formation. They moved like a pack of predators that had cornered their prey. His communication officer looked up from his station with worry. "Sir, we're receiving thousands of personal messages from the human ships." They're not military communications." "What do you mean?" "Parents, sir. They're sending messages to their children, telling them that help is coming, telling them to hold on." Veltar accessed one of the transmissions at random. A man's voice filled the bridge, rough with emotion. "Jiwoo, sweetheart, this is Daddy. I know you're scared, but I want you to be brave just a little longer. Daddy sold the shop and got on a big ship with lots of other parents. We're all coming to get you. I'm going to hug you so tight when I see you, and then we're going home. I love you, baby girl. Daddy's coming." The alien crew stood in stunned silence. They had never heard anything like the raw emotion in that human's voice. The combination of love, determination, and barely controlled fury. "Sir," the tactical officer whispered, "what are we fighting?" Commander Veltar looked at the approaching human fleet and realized he had made a terrible mistake. He wasn't facing a military operation. He was standing between parents and their children, and that made these humans the most dangerous force in the galaxy. "Contact Hegemony Command," he ordered quietly. "Tell them we need immediate consultation on human behavioral patterns." The final hour had arrived. Admiral Jang Min-seok stood on the bridge of the Determination, watching Nexus Prime Station grow larger on the main screen. Behind him, 800 ships moved in perfect coordination despite having no unified command structure. They were bound together by something stronger than military discipline, the shared determination to bring their children home. "Admiral," his communications officer announced, "the station is hailing us on all frequencies. They're demanding we withdraw immediately or face defensive action." Jang's weathered face showed no emotion. "Put me through to the entire fleet and broadcast to the station on all channels." Throughout the human formation, ship captains gathered around their communication screens. On Nexus Prime Station, Commander Veltar and his staff listened with growing unease. "This is Fleet Admiral Jang Min-seok of the Human Defense Corps," the Admiral began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "I speak for every parent, grandparent, teacher, and guardian in human space. You have 32 of our children. You will return them to us immediately, unharmed and without condition." He paused, letting the words sink in across space. "If you refuse, you will discover why humans conquered a galaxy filled with predators. We did not reach the stars through superior technology or advanced intelligence. We reached them because nothing in the universe fights harder than a human protecting their young." The transmission ended. For a moment, space was silent except for the hum of engines and the distant crackle of cosmic radiation. Commander Veltar found his voice first. "All stations prepare for defensive operations. Launch fighter squadrons and charge primary weapons." But even as he gave the orders, doubt gnawed at him. The humans weren't behaving like any enemy he had studied. Their formation made no tactical sense, yet something about it terrified him on a level he couldn't explain. On the assault ship Shield Bearer, Captain Cho Woobin checked his equipment one final time. Around him, his boarding team made their own preparations. These weren't professional soldiers, they were parents, teachers. and ordinary citizens who had volunteered for the most dangerous part of the mission. Remember, Cho told his team, we go in fast and we go in hard. The children are in detention section 12. Everything else is secondary to getting them out safely. Beside him, Kang Do-hyun adjusted an ill-fitting combat vest. The electronics merchant had never fired a weapon in his life, but no force in the galaxy could have kept him away from this mission. Captain, Do-hyun said quietly. My Ji-woo, she's the smallest one, 8 years old. Black pigtails, probably carrying a stuffed rabbit.
When we find her, we'll find her, Cho promised.
And you'll be the first person she sees. The human fleet moved into attack formation, but it wasn't like any military maneuver the aliens had ever witnessed. Instead of organized battle lines, the ships flowed around the station like water, each vessel finding its own path but all working toward the same goal. The hegemony's defensive systems activated automatically, energy beams lancing out toward the approaching ships. But the humans had anticipated this. They didn't try to fight through the defenses, they simply absorbed the damage and kept coming. Sir, Veltar's tactical officer called out in alarm. The human ships, they're not trying to avoid our fire. They're just taking the hits. It was true. Ship after ship shrugged off defensive fire that should have crippled them. Some vessels were clearly damaged, trailing atmosphere and debris, but they continued their approach without slowing. How is this possible? Veltar demanded. Sir, our intelligence reports indicate that human vessels are built with redundant systems and heavy armor. They prioritize survival over efficiency. What the aliens didn't understand was that these ships had been designed by a species that expected to fight for everything they had. Human vessels were built to take punishment and keep fighting. Because humans had learned long ago that sometimes you had to endure terrible damage to protect what mattered most. The first boarding pods launched from the human fleet like a swarm of angry insects. They were small, fast craft designed for one purpose, getting soldiers onto enemy ships. The station's point defense systems tried to shoot them down, but there were too many targets. Commander Veltar watched in growing horror as dozens of pods attached themselves to his station's hull. Security teams to all breach points. Repel boarders. But the humans weren't boarding like conventional soldiers. They came through the airlocks in small groups, moving with desperate efficiency toward specific targets. They ignored valuable equipment, strategic positions, and command centers. They had only one objective, the detention section where 32 children waited for rescue. In detention section 12, Minho heard the sounds of fighting getting closer. Explosions echoed through the station's corridors, and emergency lights cast everything in red shadows. The other children huddled together, some crying, others too exhausted to react. What's happening? Little Song Yoonji asked, her voice barely a whisper. Minho pressed his ear against the cell door, listening to the distant sounds of combat. I think they're coming for us. Ji-woo was barely conscious, her fever so high that she seemed to be floating in and out of awareness. But something in Minho's voice penetrated her delirium. Daddy? She whispered. Hold on, Ji-woo, Minho said, his young voice cracking with emotion. Just hold on a little longer. The first human boarding team reached the detention section within minutes of breaching the hull. Captain Cho Woobin led the charge, his weapon ready but his mind focused on only one thing, finding the children. The alien guards in the detention section had never faced anything like these human invaders. They fought with a fury that made no tactical sense, absorbing wounds that should have stopped them and continuing to advance. But it wasn't random violence. Every human action was focused on reaching the children. Section secured, Cho called out as the last alien guard retreated. Where are the kids? Kang Do-hyun was already running toward the cell blocks, calling his daughter's name. Ji-woo, Ji-woo, it's Daddy! The children's voices rose in a chorus of joy and relief as they recognized human voices. Parents and guardians who had traveled across the galaxy rushed toward the cells, their faces showing the strain of the past days. Do-hyun reached Ji-woo's cell first, his hands shaking as he worked to override the locking mechanism. Through the transparent barrier, he could see his little daughter lying motionless on the cold metal bench. Oh, baby, he whispered, his voice breaking. Daddy's here. Daddy's here now. The cell door opened with a soft hiss and Do-hyun rushed inside. Ji-woo was burning with fever, her small body trembling uncontrollably. But when she heard her father's voice, her eyes fluttered open. Daddy? She breathed as if she couldn't believe it was real. Yes, sweetheart. It's me. You're safe now. You're safe. All around the detention section, similar reunions were taking place. Parents held children who had been traumatized by days of separation and fear. Some kids clung so tightly to their rescuers that they had to be gently pried away for medical examination. Dr. Yoon Hana arrived with the medical team, her relief overwhelming as she saw her students alive. But her trained eye immediately noticed the signs of severe stress and trauma in all the children. We need to get them to the medical bay immediately, she told Captain Cho. Some of these kids are in serious condition. Medical evacuation is standing by, Cho replied. We'll have them on hospital ships within the hour. But Commander Veltar wasn't ready to surrender. His pride and his species' rigid adherence to protocol demanded that he continue resistance. All remaining security teams converge on Detention Section 12. We cannot allow the humans to simply take the prisoners. What he failed to understand was that the humans weren't interested in a prolonged fight. They had what they came for, and now their only priority was getting the children to safety. As the evacuation began, Admiral Jang's voice echoed through the station's communication system. Commander Veltar, this is your final warning. We have our children. We are leaving. Do not attempt to stop us. Veltar made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Launch all fighters. Stop the human evacuation vessels. The alien fighter craft launched from the station's hangars, their sleek forms moving to intercept the medical ships carrying the rescued children. It was the worst mistake Veltar could have made, because in that moment he threatened human children again. The response was immediate and terrifying. Every human ship in the fleet turned toward the alien fighters, their weapons charging with lethal intent. The parents who had shown restraint during the boarding operation suddenly faced the prospect of their children being attacked again. All ships, Admiral Jang's voice was cold as space itself. Weapons free. Protect the children at all costs. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. The humans fought with a savagery that shocked even veteran alien commanders. They didn't fight for territory or strategic advantage. They fought to ensure that 32 children would make it home safely. Ship after ship sacrificed itself to protect the medical vessels. The converted cargo hauler New Hope deliberately rammed an alien fighter that was targeting a hospital ship. The mining vessel Iron Will used its industrial laser to clear a path through the enemy formation. The medical bay of the hospital ship Healing Light buzzed with quiet activity as human doctors worked to treat 32 traumatized children. The ship's corridors echoed with sounds that had been missing from Nexus Prime Station. Soft voices, gentle laughter, and the occasional happy cry of a child calling for their parent. Dr. Yoon Hana moved from bed to bed, checking on each of her students. The physical injuries were minor, but the psychological trauma would take time to heal. Some children still flinched when they heard unfamiliar voices. Others refused to let their parents out of sight. But they were alive. They were safe. They were going home. In a private medical room, Kang Do-hyun sat beside his daughter's bed, holding her small hand as the fever finally broke. Ji-woo's eyes were clear for the first time in days, and she managed a weak smile when she saw him. "Daddy, you came for me," she whispered. "Of course I did, sweetheart. Daddy will always come for you." The stuffed rabbit that had comforted her through the ordeal sat propped against her pillow, now joined by a small fleet of toy ships that other children had shared with her. Even in their own trauma, the kids had taken care of each other. 3 days later, the full scope of what had happened began to sink in across the galaxy. The rescue operation had involved over 800 ships and 15,000 human volunteers. 3 major corporations had suspended operations to allow their employees to join the mission. Entire planetary governments had redirected resources to support the rescue effort. But it wasn't just the scale that shocked the galactic community. It was the complete unity of purpose. Humans who had never met these particular children, who lived light years away from the incident, had dropped everything to help. Rich and poor, military and civilian, young and old, they had all responded as one. Representative Bae Suji stood before the Galactic Council, addressing an emergency session called to discuss the Nexus Prime incident. The council chamber was packed with delegates from dozens of species, all trying to understand what they had witnessed. Honorable delegates, she began. What we saw at Nexus Prime was not an act of human aggression. It was an act of human love. To understand the response, you must understand what children mean to our species. She activated a holographic display showing images of human families throughout the galaxy. Other species may view their young as small adults or future resources. Humans see children as the most precious things in existence. They are not just our biological offspring. They are our hopes, our dreams, our reasons for living. An alien delegate raised a clawed hand. Representative Bay, surely you exaggerate. No rational species would risk so much for so few individuals. Bay smiled sadly. That's exactly the point. When human children are threatened, rationality doesn't matter. Logic doesn't matter. Only one thing matters: bringing them home safely. On New Busan Colony, Jiwoo was finally back in her own bed, surrounded by toys and drawings from well-wishers across the galaxy. Her recovery was progressing well, though she still had nightmares sometimes. Her father had barely left her side since their return. "Daddy," she said one evening as he tucked her in, "why did all those people come to help us? They didn't even know us." Do-hyun thought carefully about how to explain it to an 8-year-old. "Because you're a human child, sweetheart, and humans take care of their children. All of them. It doesn't matter if we've met them or not. If a human child is in trouble, every human adult will try to help. Even the ones who live far away. Especially the ones who live far away. Distance doesn't matter. Money doesn't matter. Nothing matters except making sure children are safe and happy." Meanwhile, the political aftermath was reshaping galactic policy. The Hegemony Council had been forced to issue formal apologies and implement new protocols for dealing with human families. Commander Veltar had been relieved of duty, not for his military failures, but for his complete misunderstanding of human psychology. The new protocols were comprehensive and unprecedented in galactic law. Human children were never to be separated from their guardians without explicit parental consent. Any facility detaining humans must provide family-appropriate accommodations. Human medical officers must be consulted for any health concerns involving human children. Most importantly, any threat to human children was to be treated as a potential diplomatic crisis, requiring immediate high-level intervention. But the most significant changes were happening among other alien species. The display of human parental devotion had sparked conversations across the galaxy about what those species might have lost in their pursuit of technological advancement. Dr. Velnara, a Zarathi sociologist, published a research paper that sent shockwaves through her society. After studying human family structures, she concluded that her species' efficient child-rearing methods might have eliminated something crucial: the emotional bonds that made humans willing to sacrifice everything for their young. "We have gained efficiency," she wrote, "but we have lost something that makes life worth living. Humans fight so hard for their children, not because they are primitive, but because they understand what we have forgotten, that love gives meaning to existence." Other species began implementing their own reforms. The crystalline helix started allowing parents to visit their offspring during the maturation process. The aquatic Silmari began studying human lullabies to understand how emotional comfort could aid in child development. Even the warlike Vexitan, who had long ridiculed human weakness, quietly began researching human family bonds. Their military commanders had been deeply impressed by the tactical effectiveness of parents fighting for their children. 6 months after the incident, Ambassador Lee Tae-hyun addressed the Galactic Council's annual assembly. The chamber was fuller than usual, with many species sending delegations specifically to hear the human perspective on the events. "Honorable delegates," Lee began, "you have asked me to explain the human response to the detention of our children. You want to understand why we mobilized such a massive force for 32 individuals." He paused, looking out at the diverse assembly of alien faces. "The answer is simple, though perhaps difficult for some species to comprehend. Those 32 children were not just individuals to us. They were our future, our hope, our reason for reaching the stars in the first place. Every human who joined that rescue fleet understood that they were not just saving those specific children. They were protecting the idea of childhood itself." A hegemony delegate spoke up. "Ambassador Lee, surely you understand that such emotional responses could be seen as a threat to galactic stability?" Lee's expression hardened slightly. Let me be very clear about something. What you witnessed at Nexus Prime was not the exception. It was the rule. Touch our children, threaten our families, and you will face the united wrath of humanity. Not because we are warlike, but because we love deeply. He gestured to an image of little Jiwoo playing in her garden, her stuffed rabbit nearby as she drew pictures of spaceships. That little girl and her friends are alive and happy, because 800 ships full of humans decided that some things are worth any sacrifice. We would have fought your entire fleet if necessary. We would have crossed the galaxy and back. Because that's what humans do for their children. The chamber was silent for a long moment. You asked if we understood the consequences of our response, Lee continued. The question isn't whether we understood, it's whether you finally understand us. We are not like other species. We do not calculate the cost of protecting our young because no cost is too high. We do not weigh the risks because no risk is too great. He looked directly at the hegemony delegation. We hope this incident taught you something valuable about humanity. We are not aggressive by nature, but we become the most dangerous force in the galaxy when our children are threatened. Remember that, and we will continue to be peaceful neighbors. Forget it, and you will discover why humans conquered a galaxy full of predators. The speech became one of the most widely distributed documents in galactic history. Children across human space learned about it in school. Alien diplomats studied it to understand human psychology. Military strategists analyzed it to comprehend human tactical thinking. But on New Busan Colony, in a small house with a garden full of earth flowers, 8-year-old Kang Jiwoo was simply happy to be home. She had recovered fully from her ordeal, though she still slept with her stuffed rabbit and sometimes woke up calling for her father. Do-hyun would always come running when she called, just as thousands of other humans had come running when 32 children needed them. Because that's what humans did. That's what they would always do. The galaxy was a safer place for human children now, but not because of laws or treaties. It was safer because every alien species had learned a fundamental truth about humanity. Never, ever threaten human children, because humans would cross the void between stars, fight impossible odds, and sacrifice everything they had to bring their young ones home. And after the Nexus Prime incident, nobody doubted that was exactly what they would do. The stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter knowing that somewhere among them, human children played safely in gardens watched over by parents who would move heaven and earth to protect them.